Okay, it's May 19th, 2020, and I wanted to talk about the new vaccine czar. The new vaccine czar is a guy by the name of Slaoui. I believe that's how you pronounce it, Slaoui. He is a French speaker, francophone from Morocco. He was in Mons, M-O-N-S, France. You may remember I published a video where I went to Mons, which is the NATO World Shape headquarters for the Supreme Allied Commander, which is always an American. That was during that time was Stavridis, Admiral Stavridis, as they were planning the Libya invasion, the illegal Libya invasion and bombing, as well as Syria, soon to follow after that. So this gentleman is Moncef Slaoui, PhD. He has investments in this Moderna. You may have heard a lot about the stock market yesterday and the movement of a potential vaccine. This is a very untested mRNA, messenger RNA vaccine technology. Thalidomide has had far more success in terms of its testing than this. It's very early days, as opposed to hydroxychloroquine, HCQ, which is 80 years, 80 years of long track record, as well as being cheap. But we're being rushed into this, much like a 9/11 solution, like we said. So we thought, well, why don't we learn a little bit about who these players are so that we can make a rational decision rather than a knee-jerk decision about rolling forward with this completely brand new technology. It's even, it makes thalidomide, which was known for its early success in drug trials, but then horrific side effects, generational side effects that occurred later on. It's worth talking about before we rush to this solution. So this Slaoui is 30 years with GlaxoSmithKline, the largest provider of vaccines in the world, this British company. But he has many connections that you might not know about. Again, he is involved not only with Moderna on their board, but also a sort of the DARPA of biotech in the Southeast Asia. It's called ASTAR, which is the Agency Science and Technology and Research group. Started in 2003 in Singapore, but it's very much part of this ecosystem of virus vaccine. You have the virus or the bioweapon and whatever happens to be. You deploy it, and then you do an assessment. You do a tag and trace. You do surveillance. And that's where the Singapore statistics comes in that I've talked about. And when you have a lot of NATO couriers with Singapore statistics, and you have a guy who came up through the NATO ranks like Slaoui did, he went right from Mons, France, the SHAPE headquarters there for NATO, straight to Brussels, where the UN and the WHO were based. So he's been very much a vaccine player, and he's also one of these authors of this World Health Organization R&D blueprint for viruses and vaccines. He's been the key person to push this CEPI, this preparatory group for the next pandemic. He's been predicting pandemics and saying we need a pandemic to see the need of his technology platform. We talked about the MVA technology platform yesterday. This is what is being positioned by Sina Bavari from Fort Detrick, the person we have continually told you about, authoring this R&D paper for the World Health Organization. We talked to you about Virginia Benassi, authoring it, being the World Health Organization Secretariat representative, sort of the NATO representative, writing the paper as a technical officer. We've talked to you about how chemical weapons and biological weapons were used by NATO in Libya and Syria and Sudan and Yemen after that, but we've really been consistent in our message here for 4 years. So a little bit of his background, he was the head of global vaccines at GlaxoSmithKline. GlaxoSmithKline kind of swapped their portfolio with Novartis and bought up all their vaccine intellectual property. But he also is the chairman of the board of this Galvani biotech. It's a joint venture with Google to use actual transducers and so forth on your nerve bundles to actually do neuromodulation. So this is sort of the, using the neuromodulation of your axons could prevent autoimmune diseases, for instance, where an autoimmune disease is an overreaction. Neuromodulation could potentially turn down the volume, et cetera, on your immune responses. And there's a whole bunch of diseases that are caused autoimmune. You know all of them, arthritis, et cetera. So, but this Galvani is very much a joint venture with Alphabet, which is a CIA-backed venture fund, with Google. It is a Google company, and so very much here we have a very state-supported, very much a person who wants to move kind of the deep state technology forward. You've got a agency, the A-Star, which is basically DARPA offshoring the stuff that's unsavory that we can't DARPA in the United States. So we get away from the restrictions that we have with certain types of testing and certain types of surveillance and the certain types of deployment. And that's who we have here. He also works directly for the Qatar Foundation, which is owned by the royal family of Qatar. So he has ties to the royal family of Qatar, and very strong ties to Joe Biden. Very strong ties to Joe Biden. Harry the Greek, as you might know him, or brassballs.blog has an excellent new article out about him. Maybe on the border and maybe in Belgium, now that I think about it. It's right on the French border, but like I said, I was there meeting some folks there 10 years ago as we were gearing up for the war in Libya. So, I think the Slaoui, I guess is the way you pronounce his name. His favorite politician is Joe Biden. He was very supportive of him. He talked a lot about in his interviews back then, basically about how this blueprint that we talked about, this 8 WHO blueprint, took 77 different CDC diseases that had no vaccine, and they picked out 13 of them. And then they offered up that WVA platform. So if it's sort of like Microsoft file formats. If you own the file format, you're going to own the research going forward. If you own the tools and everyone has to use Microsoft Office, let's say, you're going to be on the inside track as far as being able to charge royalties. These ties to kingdoms have been a classic way of laundering money by the Central Intelligence Agency. By neighbors of Qatar, consider them a rogue nation, a terrorist nation. There's lots of arguments with Bahrain in particular, UAE, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. So that's outlined in Harry the Greek's article here, which I'm going to use as a basis. Very strong relationship with Eric Schmidt of Google. Again, this is a way of getting around election law by laundering money through biotechs. GlaxoSmithKline built a huge center here in Rockville, Maryland, in the kind of nestled in the NIH's bosom there, not far from Port Dietrich and not far from the NIH, where Fauci is. It just all seems very scripted, and it seems like this crisis, this pandemic, is to force us into funding this brand new technology, and these efforts through the Galvani Biosciences and also with Google seem to be a way of locking in over the next 30 years. Their recommendation is 30 different vaccines that people should have, and it's not like kids where you can give 4 or 5 at once. You're going to have to get these 30 vaccines over time. There's technology here. They're talking about using biometric technology. We talked a lot about this with NADRA, with Imran Awan. So, you know, you need a license to drive. Well, you might need a license to go back to work, or some kind of biometric feedback to a phone, which then communicates that you've had the latest vaccine. It seems all very 1984, but it's happening. We predicted it, and we are exactly on the network that enabled it. In my time going on the road to these different places that moved this stuff, bioweapons, I focused very much on uranium because of the book Uranium One, Clinton Cash, etc. But it very well could be that the partner that I had, the research partner that I had, task force, journalist Jenny Moore, was the one who was correct about it being more about bioweapons. She was the one who told me that Rahm Emanuel and Imran were in this joint venture in Pakistan at this children's hospital and had this bio lab there. She was the one who was informing me about these meat processing plants being used as a way of injecting bioweapons and doing biotesting on populations. So we went to Delphi, Indiana, where 2 girls were murdered, where there was a meat packing plant, where there was a lot of illegal immigration. I went to Waterloo, Iowa, where there's a Tyson's chicken plant. We went to Salisbury, Maryland, where there's a Purdue chicken plant. We looked at these methods for getting people permission or credentials called a TWIC card to work on military bases as a way of infiltrating our systems. He was also on the board of this. Slaoui was also on the board of the Human Vaccines Projects and Moderna Therapeutics, also a company called Sutrovax. He's done postdoc work at Tufts and also Harvard Medical, and he is fluent in English, Arabic, and French. So my initial reactions to this person being named is just all the things that we don't know about him, and there is such a strong connection to this WHO R&D blueprint. It all seems preordained. There's no chance in it at all. It all seems to be scripted. It's hard to believe that this person who gets named by Trump was such a close friend of Sina Bavaria and such a close friend and a contributor to the same exact document that Virginia Benassi puts together. Remember, Giuseppe Benassi is the head of security at NATO. So this seems to be a very scripted NATO play at the end of the day. So there's some great research here by Harry the Greek on this new person, and I look at this and I see an unbroken chain here between the development of the bioweapon at Fort Detrick and places like that, the farming it out to a NATO partner across the border in Canada, to a place like Winnipeg, the farming it out to Australian labs, English labs like Porton Down, so that to get around restrictions. Then using offshore partners like A-STAR and Singapore Statistics to do the deployment of the weapon, the evaluation of the weapon, the health surveillance of the weapon, and then using that data and bringing it back as illegal trials, like the 500,000 PCR test kits that are under lock and key that come here under secret negotiations by our Governor Hogan, through secret negotiations with the government of South Korea. So it seems to be a very inside game, and it seems like Trump is, unfortunately, the odd man out here. I'm not sure what the solution is going to be here, other than just putting the facts up. There's just such a strong relationship. There's a 100-year relationship with GlaxoSmithKline in China. They built the Tianjin Center in 1987. There's a huge investment in China. It just seems like 100% of these pharmaceuticals are made there in China that are going to be imported as part of this deal. It basically seems like our lives are kind of destined to be just sort of cattle at this point. I mean, there's no plan here or no infrastructure plan here or any kind of plan for people in the United States in this scenario. It's all NATO. And I would, if there was anything here that was promising in what's being proposed, I would be the first person to jump forward. There is the company, Cambridge, Massachusetts, is the location of Moderna, but there's a very large offshore presence in other countries, especially China, also Italy, in this company. It's sort of a front here. So I'm very concerned about who's giving Trump these recommendations, and it looks very much like a NATO play. Again, I always try to recommend things that Trump can do in the next 5 minutes, like declassify the people who use the Blackberries, the NATO Blackberries, declassify the information regarding Imran, just any of the information, to let people know what's actually going on. His travel schedule back and forth to Pakistan may be a good place to start. His communications and his IP addresses. Again, when I see people communicating with Singapore statistics that are NATO couriers back and forth to Nanjing, China since 2016, you have to wonder, if their story about, hey, I was just at a bike race, in 2020, one of these two cannot be true. One of these two cannot be true. So thanks very much for tuning in today, and we'll keep bringing you more. We'll keep drilling down. We'll see about the very strong connection between Sina Bavari and Mr. Slaoui. If there's an Iranian connection there or not. There's certainly a connection through the document they wrote together. There's certainly a connection between this R&D document. The World Health Organization has written really a sort of stacking the deck for themselves for the whole end-to-end virus discovery through all the way through trials to release of the vaccine to future modifications of the vaccine. And you are the target. You are the target.